How would you fare against a Termina festival? Now by you, I mean 3 distinctive groups of people. The average person, the average Fear and Hunger player, and the average Olivia Boss viewer. Unlike our previous episode where we looked at how the average person would do in the dungeon, the average person isn't because Termina is much more forgiving. There's a lot more food around, and the situation is a lot more familiar. We've all been in a city, we've all had scary encounters with scary people, so the average person wouldn't be completely screwed over in this situation. There's also the added benefit that the city of Perhevel is objectively safer than the dungeon. But that brings up the problem. What would the average person actually do? None of these benefits matter if the average person just sits in the train and refuses to go anywhere, which is probably what would happen. The average person, not really understanding the situation and already in a safe area, would most likely just stay in that safe area until help arrives. It would be very unlikely that the average person would go into the city, for example. They would just stay on the train and be a worse version of Samri. At least Samri went outside to get moon-scorched. If the average person ever did make it to the city, under very unlikely circumstance, they would probably die immediately. It would be very similar to Tanaka and Marco, where they would go out, obviously with a partner, and would get cooked immediately. They'd either die from the enemies in the area, most likely Giggles, or the Death Mask, or they would just get executed by one of the other contestants, most likely Caligura or Pav. This brings us to the average Fear and Hunger player, who would fare a lot differently than the average person. The average Fear and Hunger player has, like I said before in the previous episode, the most powerful thing you can have in Fear and Hunger, which is knowledge of how the game works. The average Fear and Hunger player would probably be able to pick up and recruit a lot of cast. The average Fear and Hunger player would also probably be able to save a lot of the cast. They would be able to save Abella from getting moon-scorched and probably get Heinrich out of the mayor's mansion. And since they just know more, I also think it'd be very likely that the average Fear and Hunger player would be able to know a lot of the skills that are character-specific, like engrave. It doesn't take a genius to stab yourself in the face, but it does take one to know what symbols to carve, and the average Fear and Hunger player does know those symbols, and would be able to effectively engrave themselves and their party members. The average Fear and Hunger player would also be like a diplomat, knowing the right things to say to calm down other contestants, and even some enemies. Like, a lot of moon-scorched villagers can be scared off if you bluff them hard enough. Dark priests will leave you alone if you give them a rust-colored pearl. You can straight up insta-kill the Vile by talking to him in the right way, and the Woodsman will leave you alone if you use the right dialogue options. All of these are things that the average person just wouldn't know, and that the average Fear and Hunger player would be able to use in their advantage. The only problem I see is that the average Fear and Hunger player might overshare a little. They might show that they know much more about the contestants than they expected in the first place. It'd be pretty weird if you met someone randomly on a train and they just knew you by your first name. Although again, I don't really think this is going to be much of an issue because the average Fear and Hunger player would always be helping other people out. So the contestants would probably have a lot more trust in them than the average person. I feel like the average Fear and Hunger player would be to the contestants how August is to us, constantly there just when we need them to save us, but unlike August, we're able to join and lead a party. But all of this doesn't really answer the question. How would you, yes, you, fare against the Termina Festival? You, the average Olivia Boss viewer. And it's pretty obvious. You wouldn't fare very well at all. You actually wouldn't even go into the Termina Festival because Rare would be too scared by your presence to even show up. Anyways, that's it. That's the video. I'm still going to eat and review McChicken at 1K, so, McChicken.